Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues and listeners, here we are again, another podcast session and another great guest. Now, today's guest is Michael White, who's the president of Trade Network Consultants. And everybody should know who Michael is, especially if you come from the US of A. So Michael, lovely to have you on board, sir. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Chris, for letting me be here to talk with you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Now, Mike, we give everybody a little bit of background, and when we introduce somebody, we always ask them, what are you currently doing? What are the general responsibilities of the position you're in? And obviously now, how has the pandemic affected your business or your experiences? So if you can start off first, please, just tell us, what are you doing as the president and how are things going? And then what else are you doing?
So the consulting roles, after I just left CNS at the end of the year and have started up my own company. And I've done this once before many years ago. And as I've grown older, I've decided I'll pick out and choose of maybe a few things I want to do. So what I'm doing is basically focusing on air cargo and somewhat on technology things I've worked over the years, whether it's security, customs, advising. We're looking at financial platforms since I got involved with CNS a lot with that sort of thing. And so because there are a lot of people that have also left the industry for one reason or the other, I have a very large audience to help me on certain projects as needed. So I have a security expert. I have a government affairs expert in Germany. I've got an individual in Singapore that I used to work with as well. So I'm kind of covering the gamut. So as things come up, I've got people who are interested in a project here and there. And so I'm trying to put my old friends together to work and not just sit around and think they're going to retire. So it's a good opportunity. And for me, I've been focusing on a couple of things on the financial side, working with PayCargo, and then I'm working with some technology folks over in India and Sinhan. And so just trying to keep my foot in the door of where I'm interested. As my wife said, you're not retiring, you're working more now than you ever did before. So we call it the smorgasbord effect, I guess. You pick what and choose what you want.
Yeah, but it's good though, Michael, isn't it? And what you said there is very true. And I'm finding myself doing it as well. And as a result of these podcasts, so many things open up, but it's such a lovely thing to keep learning. But the most important thing, like you just said, is you can actually pick and choose what you really like to do. And then if you really like to do something, the passion and the engagement is there. It's a new energy.
Yeah. And then my whole thing is, and hopefully once the COVID is back and we can move around, I've got some places back in the world I want to go travel and do some things. And so I got to fit those in as well. And, I've got to get back to New Zealand. I haven't been to New Zealand in a long time. And that's one of my first trips. I want to just spend quite a bit of time in New Zealand again and see the Kiwis. And I really enjoy, particularly on the South Island. I don't know what it is about the South Island, but I really love Christchurch in that part of the world. So.
Yeah. I must admit, it's one of the few places I've been to that I would always go back to if I had the chance. But I think every time I go back there, I'd want to stay there longer.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to move.
Yeah,
got my shots now, and I'm hopefully we can start moving here again soon.
Oh, you've had them, have you?
Yeah, had both my shots now. So
that's good. So how are things going over there now with the vaccines?
So things were kind of slow, but now it seems things are really picking up as the vaccine numbers of availability, particularly now with Johnson & Johnson's new one shot. Things are going, depends by state, and each state's doing things a little bit different, but even some of them are doing 24-hour shots. I saw in New York at the Javits Center, they're going to be open 24 hours a day. In the nighttime hours, they're only going to give the Johnson & Johnson shots, the one shot. And so, but here I live in North Carolina. The county I lived in, it was a drive-up affair. It was a long wait, about 4 hours of waiting in your car, both times. So, but they put 600 or 700 people through the lines in about 4 hours. So it's moving.
And how long were you between your two shots?
It was about 3 weeks.
Okay, so you had
About
Pfizer.
3 weeks,
You had
and
Pfizer,
then
did you?
I had Moderna.
Okay, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so 3
And
weeks.
I had 1 day of side effects on the second shot. It was, I mean, you felt really kind of icky for a day, for
Yeah,
about 30 hours, and it was over.
but it makes you feel so much better in yourself, doesn't it?
I think so. I mean, you still got to practice social
Yeah,
distancing and
yeah,
wearing the mask and all that, because you can still be a carrier even
yeah,
with the vaccine. So yeah, I still got to be careful, but we're getting there.
yeah. But no, I think it's good, and it's also good that I think a lot of the practices will roll over after COVID and after everybody thinks everybody's okay. I think a lot of those practices, which are the right things to do, will roll over. So it's a good thing, and it's good to care about others.
Yeah.
That's one thing I hope.
Yeah.
Touch
And
wood.
you have a lot of people, different beliefs, and it's, I practice what I preach. Let's keep it that way. So
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Now let's start off right. So we've covered the consultancy, which is great. Now let's cover the CNS years. Okay. So you had a good dozen years there, I believe,
yep.
and then 3 at the helm. So now, how have you seen things change, Mike, over that period of time before we get to the pandemic?
Within CNS.
Yeah, because obviously it
So
started with the CAS principle and platform, and
I mean, CAS, the US CAS, which is different than the rest of the world,
yep,
which
yep,
is, the rules in the US are always different. The government, the United States, has different rules.
yep,
And it's somewhat hard for particularly some of the airline members they like those international rules set by IATA, but CNS was a separate corporation for a reason, due to after deregulation. So a lot of people had issues with that, because the rules are different. But when I was brought in, I was hired by Alex Popovich, who was the acting head of cargo for CNS at the time. And I knew Alex. I actually met Alex. Those don't know him, if you don't in the industry, he just retired from IATA. But
yeah,
I was in Lisbon the day he was being introduced to cargo committee when he came from British Airways, and he and I were waiting out in the hallway beforehand. So I was out there with him because I was an observer from the Air Transport Association. So anyway, I knew Alex, and coming with him, I was brought in because of e-commerce, e-freight.
yeah,
I was the e-freight guru, 1/3 e-freight, 1/3. I was also the regional director for Cargo 2000.
yeah,
And then I had this role of the regulatory issues in Washington. So I was kept quite busy. And so that was really my focus why I was brought in with CNS. And my days, over the first 9 years was what there. I became the advocate for e-freight. I went around preaching all over the United States. I must have hit thousands of people trying to explain to them and twist their arm, you need to get it off of paper. Well, we see how well that worked, but I got about 50% of them done. I still had a few more, but we were at the point that we were, that tipping point that you either do it or you don't. And so we wound up moving into that. But the regulatory issues was always the issues with TSA and CBP. I've been working with the government issues since particularly one of my airline days, all the way back in the 90s. I've been working with that time FAA on security, and then customs, US Customs, which turned into Customs and Border Protection. And then over the 9/11 years, I was head of cargo at the Air Transport Association, the US arm of one separate association representing US carriers during all the 9/11 issues, and even the TW 800 issues when after TWA explosion, when we first started a lot of security. So all that continues today. That never ends. It never ends. It's like you don't seem like you get very far, but it's trying to be in the doors in Washington, knocking and trying to explain to congressmen why we need certain rules, trying to advise the government officials, the regulatory officials, why we can do this, can't do this, but trying to really build a partnership with them. And that's hard between government and trade. It's been particularly hard with TSA.
Yeah.
So those were the roles. And then as I came into the role of president of CNS, the role was be the head of CNS and continue to do what you were also doing. So we'll double you up. So I had to oversee the CAS issues. So and one of the big issues I pushed with the CAS side and as the endorsed agents, there's a responsibility as an endorsed agent at forwarder of things you need to be doing. You're part of the security, you're part of the safety with handling dangerous goods. And it's not just the transfer of money between parties.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was hard because I was really, lithium batteries was a particularly issue that we continue to have to be concerned about. And with all the e-commerce shipments and the things that are in e-commerce, what do we know what's inside of it? We have to be even more responsible of what's going inside those shipments. So I really pushed that the forwarders had to be IATA through an authorized training school. There was a lot of pushback and still is today over that. But my whole thing is you can be an endorsed agent and be responsible as to what you want to do, because if something happens, the regulators are going to come back to those entities who were involved, and you've got to be doing what you're supposed to be doing. You are the front end.
Yeah, I think, Mike, and I want to come back to that e-commerce conundrum a little bit later on. But with that hat trick of responsibilities that you had with the cargo, obviously I remember you well with the Cargo 2000. But also with e-freight and then the regulatory side. I mean, that's a hell of a package to try and put across. And with everybody agreeing in principle that so many pillars make sense, but then they don't want to build them or they don't want to be accountable for them. And you just mentioned about people being responsible. They forget that at the end of the day, they're accountable. And those responsibilities go all the way upstream and downstream. Anybody that's part of it, they've got to appreciate that, which is why I do not understand still to this day why certain commercial argumentation and pressure and internal structure of organizations allows that safety element to be pushed into a corner or into the shadows or behind the cupboards until such a time as something then forces everybody to redo things, as we've all experienced over many years. I remember we were all at the World Cargo Symposium when there was a major issue, and then everybody was wondering, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? What restrictions, etc. So it's a huge conundrum, and you've had to address now with Cargo 2000 a concept that made sense, but a concept that was allowed to be influenced or changed by the trigger setting and the way people understood their own situation. You've then got e-freight, and we've still got so much paperwork today. So hopefully, touch wood, please God, this COVID, the pandemic and sanitization, that should be the catalyst to get rid of it once and for all. But it needs people to say from such and such a date, no more.
Yeah.
And why do they not do it?
And it becomes a competitive issue. If you look at airlines, why don't all the airlines come into play and just say, do it? Well, okay, that can be considered collusions because all the airlines said on this date they're going to do it. So there was this concern, a legal issue of collusion after all of the things we had with the pricing and issues and everybody. So everybody's concerned. But then he had some carriers said, okay, we're going to do it or we're going to charge you. And then the forwarders, well, just go to someone else.
Yes.
And then you had other forwarders that took a different, better solution, said, if you don't send all your information electronically to us, we just won't take your cargo. I think that's the best solution, but people have to step up to do it. But where are you going to be? It becomes a sales issue.
Yeah.
But you have to have leaders that are willing to put it out there that we're going to do this because it's best for the industry. The forwarders want to do it, but they don't want to do it. I got to do paper over here for airline A, and airline B says electronically, and then I got this mix in between. But then we also have the issue of governments still wanting paper too. So then you got to print paper either at destination or send it in the pouch. And Brazil has always been one of our hardest issues. Brazil's just been a tough country to deal with in general. And Brazil wants paper. They don't want the airway bill number duplicated for 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, there's little rules and things like that where electronically, if we send this stuff electronically, we can check to make that airway bill hasn't been reused, or we can do electronic checks in the information. The systems are there. It's just now demanding to do it. Now, from the US inbound, we've had AMS, now ACE.
Yeah.
For 20 years. Over 20 years, we've had ACE. And so now it's required. Some people still send paper.
Yes.
CBP does not require paper. They require it filed electronically. But why are we sending it to the US? Out of the US, we're still in paper mode. The US government doesn't have an electronic export. So I'm on the committees that we're working right now to finalize the data set, not just for air, but for every mode.
Yeah.
And we're getting very near so we can start programming. And that will be a mindset change, particularly for the US forwarding exporters, because you're going to have to file all that data electronically, and not necessarily at the last gateway, but where you originated the cargo. So if you got it in Nashville, send the information from Nashville. Don't wait till it's actually being put on the last flight out.
Yep.
So those are the mindset changes that we've had. And I think a lot of those that I work with in the industry on ocean and rail and motor carriers, we all understand it. And now it's going to we have to push that back out. Say, hey, it's coming, get ready.
Yeah. Now, the pandemic has done a lot of harm, but it's probably enhanced everything to do with digitization and modernization, probably crammed 10 years into that 1 year.
Right.
E-commerce has taken off. I mean, every single person who didn't, or who had some sort of resistance or reasons as to why they didn't want to, I think they've all succumbed now, and that's going to just go more and more and more. So for the whole industry, the industry needs to embrace that concept that has been done so well by the single entities, the Amazons of this world. I mean, it's phenomenal what they've done. But if the industry doesn't get together, so whether it's shipper, forwarder, carrier, GHA, etc., if they don't get together as one solid unit, they're going to start to struggle now with everything else that's going to come. So now is the time more than ever. And you're known, I was reading up, and you've been termed as the e-vangelist, for the work to full electronic documentation in air transportation. So, you're the Billy Graham of electronic documents. So, yes, that's it. You get out there and get them singing, but you're the one now who's pushing it and has been pushing it. I mean, it's got to start taking momentum now, Mike.
I know the touch points have been a big issue on, people don't want to touch paper and all the touch points. And it's, I think people are finally up for the change. I think part of that has been driven. Just send me the information electronically. It does work. I can work from that. And it's the capability. It's just like you go into a cargo warehouse, the guys on the forklift. They used to work and pull by airway bills. They pull copies of airway bills and try to pull stuff. Now they got electronic pads on the forklifts.
Yeah.
And you can go and pick and grab and verify. And but what I am finding, though, a lot of concern I have is this e-commerce shipments.
Yeah.
At so many small pieces in these consolidations that are coming in, and we're having a really hard issue into the U.S. just customs wise, because we have to report ACAS, advanced cargo data, prior to being boarded the aircraft. It's just a few data elements. They're all on the airway bill.
Yeah.
What's happening? People are shipping this stuff into the U.S. and they think they're e-commerce gurus now, particularly some forwarders, and they come in, and the post office is another one. China Post is 80% of the mail coming in the United States is China Post.
Yeah.
CBP is x-raying 100% of everything that comes in from China Post. And the amount of stuff they're finding that's said to be and not in there is quite dramatic. So we have to start at the beginning as to gathering that data, even down to these small parcels. ACAS data is not marrying up with manifest data, and it should.
Yeah.
But you'll have 14,000 shipments in one airway bill sometimes in some of this e-commerce stuff.
Yeah.
One carrier is bringing in close to 120 LD3s a day of China Post into New York.
Yeah.
And so how do you go through all that stuff? And customs themselves is in quite a quandary as to how do they manage all this small parcels that we used to have in bigger shipments. So
no, 100% agree. And we were talking earlier before we came on about sport, and if you play sport, you end up having injuries later on in life, and it either makes you remember or not. But the injuries that are in our industry are because people don't make things clear enough. Then they don't teach people what to do and why to do it. Then they don't make sure it's in compliance. And at the end of the day, then they've got no control. And we're in a situation now where the growth, like you said, of e-commerce, we're losing control because every single area, it doesn't matter where, Mike, has got a similar situation whereby they're now having to focus more on their screening, whether it be on reconfirmation on import side to see exactly what's going on, but more so on the export side, they're having to do rescreening, and the findings are consistent virtually everywhere. So something has got to be done to have a level playing field. And that level playing field has got to also have major communication or clarity exercises so that the consumer knows exactly what they're actually doing and how dangerous it can be. Because, I mean, I don't know how many times you've flown. I mean, it's incredible. And we've bumped into each other all over the world. But the one thing that we both do every time we come in or out is we're asked the same questions when we check in.
Yeah.
And that declaration or that awareness or that understanding of your responsibility, and you will be held
accountable. And that's where
advanced
data, if we were to use the advanced data and target it, look to make sure it's correct, are the pieces in weight? I mean, you have all these discrepancies in CAS. What's the biggest issue? Pieces and weight.
Yep.
They're different on the airway bill than what they receive.
Yep.
And then you're starting to make the corrections. And then the next issue is rate issues. Why are rate issues? You got these one spot rates and everything going on that don't marry up in the contract side. That's like the top three things that are of issues.
Yeah.
But if we let the electronic data, say, is it okay to put on a freighter? Is it okay to put on a patch flight? So we have basically bastardized what ready for carriage is been in the contract of the airway bill.
Yeah.
We should not accept cargo until all the things are correct. Instead, we accept it and we try to work it out on the back end.
Correct.
And that's the stuff we've got to discipline ourselves, and the customers have to help to be disciplined too. We got to have it right. We got to have the information, and everything will move smoothly, and we won't have this delays in delivery of cargo and trying to be fixing things on the back end when it arrives.
Correct.
And that's what we do a lot of today.
We do far too much of it, and the thing that I've found over the years as well is the poor guys in the warehouse and on acceptance, they know all these things, and it's logic to them. Why on earth isn't it being done properly? And this ready for carriage has been affected so much because of speed and late closeout times and people not knowing and trying to improve their consolidations and all sorts. And then there's pressure, so you can't do ready for carriage properly. You then have effectiveness of your loads, and you have all sorts of issues that have capacity impacts on. And then, like you said, you get the argument then from commercial: why didn't it max out? Why didn't you have this on? You even don't have correct, do not top load or fragile, even labeling. You're now getting, well, not you're now getting, but it's now becoming something that people are spending more time on. Is pharmaceutical shipments not even being declared properly and not being labeled properly on the packaging. So then they're not being handled the way they should be. And that's affected people's lives, Mike. So I think now more than ever is the opportunity and the time to start much better PR and teaching people why. So even when they go online with their e-commerce and booking it, there should be certain box tickers and references and making people really appreciate what what they're actually contributing to if they don't do it correctly.
And if you use the IT capabilities that are out there, you know, making sure all the boxes are ticked and making sure everything's correct before it moves on to the next phase, it would save so much time and money, and it'll help the discipline.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a cargo manager at JFK, and one of the things, you know, I always from the commercial side was, you know, if we can cut this off with an hour cutoff time, an hour, I got to get it over to the airplane, just to get it over to the airplane. Oh, we can get a hot shot running, we get it over there in the last minute, it's worth X. I said, but how much did it cost on the operations side? So I always would bring in, I want to make money, but how much is it costing us to get there? Or how much are we spending on the back end for all the other costs? So when I went to headquarters and I was overseeing all the cargo operations, I started comparing between the major gateways in New York and Los Angeles and Chicago and all the gateways I had. And then I had Tokyo and I had Hong Kong. Why is Tokyo so good? Because the Japanese are very efficient and to the T. Tokyo costs more, but Tokyo, I tell you what, that plane was loaded to the max. We made the most revenue on the money, and everything what they said was on in the consolidation was there. You had few discrepancies.
Yep. And
that's the thing we can't, you know, load factor. I always hear this issue about the IATA load factor. I don't believe in the IATA load factor. I worked for them. The number is totally wrong. What is a load factor on an airplane? It's not that the cube is full.
Yeah.
It's that the maximization of the aircraft and the weight and the balance and everything else you got to do is correct. And how do you measure that? That's very hard to measure. But, you know, there's numbers you can put into play there that can help you. And that was always I'm an operations guy. That's where my background was. I want efficiency. I want my guys to have the tools they need. I want to know what they want, because they know, the people on the dock, the people at the counter, they know what they need. It's not, as headquarters, my job was give them the tools they need and they'll make us all look good.
Yeah.
And that was always my belief in that job.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm hoping now that, you know, this sustainability issue regarding business side. So that, and the fact that people were chasing, you know, market share and growth and revenue, you know, to be a revenue millionaire, but be suffering on the profit side doesn't make sense at all. So the whole transparency of the total cost and what it affects, that's so important. And I think people now, they need to focus on caring about consistency, capability, you know, competence, compliance, and controls, because otherwise to clear up afterwards is so much more expensive. And the people that do it on the front line now, they need to be given a little bit more credibility for what they were doing. Certain training should be put back. I think there's going to be a new type of approach that's necessary, because so many people, we spoke earlier about experience leaving the business, so many people are going to be expected to carry over. And because they've done things now during the pandemic, they're going to be expected to be able to do things as soon as this bounce back comes back and everything ramps up and you've got to be faster, quicker, do all this. Then they got to face problems where maintenance of equipment has been delayed because people are worried about cash flow. So all of the normal things that you would expect, but nobody's going to be focusing on helping those people address those new ways of working. Plus, you've got, as the global media keeps pumping out day after day, you've got mental stress issues, anxieties, you've got guilt issues, you've got people worrying about other areas, you've got fatigue, you've got stress on the job, all those things. When you think so many people are dealing with heavy machinery, they're around an aircraft, it's got to be a new way. So all of this sustainability of the model now, I think people are going to want to work for companies that show they care about people. And then we'll get more care about the companies, so there'll be less damage, looking after assets, etc. I think there's an opportunity now for a complete new mindset, of which data and the value of data and digitization and everything that you've spoken there about, you know, with regards to e-freight, all of those things are so important, because the old days of saying, when Fred comes in, he'll tell us what happened last night because he knows best. He was on shift.
Right.
Yes, Fred probably does, and everybody appreciates Fred. But my goodness me, how more effective would Fred be if he had real-time data and real-time triggers or warning signs? There'd be less meltdowns. There'd be less problems with, restricting flights coming in because of a backlog or not enough dollies. So all of the practical things you're talking about, Mike, it's so important that you, as the evangelist, bring out another sermon and start pushing it. But it's got to be, in this instance now, I think there's got to be a fear of what will happen if we don't do it,
Right.
rather than forcing people to do something that they don't understand why.
I think you have this divide between airlines and forwarders. Major forwarders are, you go in their cargo facilities, they're becoming more and more high tech.
Yeah.
They got the scanners. I worked with a project on ULD control.
Yeah.
Recently, and in what it was, it's using Bluetooth versus using RFID. Why do we use Bluetooth? Because it's in every telephone.
Yeah.
And the devices, you don't have to worry about ICC regulations and European regulations on the frequencies and all of that. You put the Bluetooth reader in a cargo facility, you plug it in, 3 or 4 of them, you covered the whole warehouse. Now I know if the ULD just comes in and out of the door.
Yeah.
So and for an airline, having managed to hold one of the largest ULD fleets in the world, just knowing where those containers are is always the issue. But forwarders sitting on them in their cargo facilities. If we build this partnership of utilizing the equipment better, giving the tools to the guy in the forklift driver is an important part. The guy at the dock is the most important person moving the cargo.
Yeah.
And we don't train them as well as they should be. We
Right.
don't pay them in many cases what they should be paid. And we don't provide them the tools that make them more efficient, that even if we paid them more, they'd be more efficient.
Yep.
And they can save us money. Why accept cargo that's damaged? Do they even check?
Yep.
Right there, stop it. Don't let it go. Is it properly packaged?
Yep.
We've got to, that puts the discipline. I was a cargo supervisor in Miami. And if you ever worked back in Miami in the 90s, it was wild, wild west in the cargo section of that airport. But I had flights to South America, which were hot. The cargo capacity was hot back then. Everybody's moving electronics and high value goods. And our sales team was selling to everybody that could come on. And I would literally have people sitting at the dock hoping that their cargo would get on an airplane. I said, why am I fighting this every night?
Yep.
I started a project for 1 week. I dimensionalized every shipment coming through the door. I reweighed every shipment that came through the door. I would refuse more shipments because it was improperly packaged. And the sales team went berserk.
Yep. Yep.
But I got good customers that knew what to do. They brought in what they said they were going to bring in that could fit on the airplane. I didn't have backlogs, and I was getting more high value customers that wanted to be on my plane because they knew it would move.
Yep.
And within a month, we made more money. I had less issues, and I didn't have people calling me all day long. Why didn't my cargo get on the airplane?
Yep.
And it was just trying to make it efficient. But I started x-raying every piece of cargo, or randomly x-raying cargo. I took some of the old black and white x-ray machines they were storing that were being taken out of the passenger room. I had the security guards x-ray it. Just x-ray the flower shipments.
Yep.
What's in the flower shipments? They're getting flower rates. Were there flowers in there? No. So, it was those sort of things. You just have to stay on top of it. And there are good forwarders. There's forwarders are so-so, and forwarders are just playing the game. The good forwarders know what they're doing, and that's what they're there for. And, to me, there's a whole discipline that's got to go. But the best thing I ever did was hire an industrial engineer. And she was right out of college. And I tell you what, she went into cargo warehouse in San Francisco once and just followed the forklifts through the warehouse. It was like this strictly lines. There was no efficiency to the lines. We said, what's the flow? How is it doing? How can we reduce the flow? the injuries went down, the damages went down, the efficiency, because we developed a flow based off an industrial engineer's plan.
Yep. Yep.
And you take a company like UPS, they didn't have sales teams for the longest period of time in the 90s. They had industrial engineers.
Yeah.
And I think that's some of the things we need to relook at, some of the conventional, particularly the passenger combination carriers.
Yeah, no, we've got to be different. And you're talking about some of the forwarders, and I agree with you. You know, some of the forwarders who have gone from good to great, they're now looking at what they have to contend with, and that's why they're chartering their own aircraft and they're their own destiny with what goes on, and they don't mess around. They don't mess around with their charge.
And you saw that during COVID in the US.
Yeah.
Look at forwarders chartering whole passenger airplanes because they knew they had consistent capacity.
Yep. Yep. And it makes a big difference. And I think coming back to the fact, if you're an operational disciplinarian, you know, you're always going to be an enemy of most because you're trying to do the things right. But I'm hoping now that this balance between the old survival way, which meant, you know, every penny, you've got to do this, you've got to be flexible. Flexibility needs to turn to agility. And also now survival needs to turn to sustainability. And if people can be more agile and more resilient, and also pivot better with things like you're saying with engineering and different ways of looking at things, it just makes everybody better. It's like having a really effective toolkit. The amount of times I've tried to do something around the house and I haven't got the right tools, and if you try and make do, you're always going to have to repair.
Right.
So
no, I take all my experiences because I had my airline experience. I've had my government affairs but I worked for a cargo facility. I worked for a cargo ground handler in O'Hare. We handled 42 airlines, and I was owned by an airline.
Yep.
And they had their way of doing things. And I had 5 facilities, 5 warehouses around O'Hare. And the main problem we wound into was everybody wanted to do it their way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as a ground handler, you don't make money doing it every other way. Yeah. You have your process, you have your pro, and sometimes I wanted to get rid of airline customers. They weren't in my best interests.
Yep.
So why do I want them here when I have a better customer that wants to work with me versus demanding this is the way you want to do?
Yep.
And airlines do that a lot. They hold the ground handlers. The ground handlers don't get due respect either sometimes because, I'm the biggest airline in the world, you'll do it my way. But in a ground handling facility, you have to have process flows, export, import specialists, dangerous goods, government, and you're working in for multiple airlines across multiple cultures. It's like being in the UN. Yeah. I had China mainland customers and I had Taiwan customers, and they were in the same building, and I had to whole deal with all those issues. So there was a lot of different things that the ground handlers have become the mainstay that are really, we have to give the best responsibility to, and we have to, again, a lot of this is all partnership.
Yeah, no, I agree. And carriers who want the what if SLA and differences, they're just or they want dedicated teams, and then
I only want this person to work on my counter.
Yeah, and then they have oversight with the extra S in the GSA contracts, and there's repetition and difference and vested interests. It's not good, and I think that model is something that's definitely going to change now coming out of this particular fright that everybody's had.
I think you're right. I think this whole COVID era has driven us into having to relook in the real reality of what can we do with electronic.
Yep.
There's value to everybody in that, particularly now. How do we work smarter and better?
Yep.
We can work from home. We can use, video conferencing. We can use all these tools and put them to better use, but we still have a ways on the education side that I think we've got to start with a younger crowd.
Yep.
I think we have to bring in schools as an opportunity.
Yep.
That there are real careers in this sort of thing, and build into a new culture. I'm sure you're the same way. I learned a lot of the things working in the warehouse from scratch. Writing my first airway bill, I copied the airway bill that was in the file the day before.
Yeah.
I mean, my little station in Lincoln, Nebraska, I always said I never knew how to write an airway bill correctly. But the fine friends at Air France brought me to Chicago to teach me how to write international airway bills. So,
Yeah.
but that's how you learned. It wasn't a real school learning. And there's, I've been to Lufthansa training. Lufthansa has great training.
Yeah.
Lufthansa a lot because of what they do. And I'm not picking, because Lufthansa, but they do what they are. They are what they are. I went through their ULD training course. I handled ULDs for 20 years. I learned more in that ULD training course I never knew.
Yeah.
How the numbering system worked and, how they're built and what they're scheduled for FAA and all those sort of things. It was a great course. And I was in management. I'm glad I got those sort of things.
Yeah, Mike, I did 28 years with Lufthansa. And the one thing I look back on, I would have paid, looking back now, I would pay and would have paid then to go to Zeeheim. Yep. Also the socializing and some of the other benefits, but it was an incredible place. And what they taught you was second to none. And the BUP certification is still a problem today. And what Lufthansa did back then in the day was exceptional. And now you're talking about knowing where your pallets and your containers are. The BUP system and slack pallets, it still causes huge problems. So
right.
That's something that needs to be done. Now, you've given a nice segue into another organization and another side of your skills. You're also working with Florida International University in Miami, and that's about bringing new generation and making people aware of what the cargo world is. And I think, again, this COVID issue has brought the supply chain and aviation industry especially into the focus of so many people. If ever there was a time now to start attracting as many people to come into the business as possible with as many different ideas, because it's not all just about, let's just take cargo. It's not all just about cargo. You've got marketing in cargo, you've got finance in cargo, you've got all the IT, the technical side, you've got health, you've got livestock. So you've got people from all sorts of backgrounds or interests can think to themselves now, do you know what? I can do this, but I can do it in this international business whereby if I do it right in one location, maybe I can move to another country, because everywhere an airplane lands and takes off from, you've got the same support mechanism around it, the same ecosystem. So what a fantastic time now to get youngsters involved, but also, like you said earlier, to teach youngsters ahead of coming into that business about the business. So when they do come in, it's not looking around and thinking to themselves, my God, what's going on in this facility? Yeah. Some of the facilities now are exceptional.
Yeah. No, I think we're at a time, what FIU is doing in their School of Business is putting in a logistics degree. But I talked to the dean about it, and we had a great discussion. I said, I'm from the old school. I think you have to start from the basics. Yes. And maybe you can even drive that down in US into high school.
Yep.
Because more people are, and I like the German way, because you're working toward
apprenticeship
positions that need to be done. You need mechanics, you need plumbers, you need all these things you need. But we also need people in air cargo. Can we start, airlines are sexy. Let's sell that point as best we can, because that part's good. But I used to speak every once in a while at George Mason University, who had a program as well in Washington, D.C. area. And I would talk to these students about air cargo. I go in and give my little spiel about air cargo, but what they want to hear about, they want to hear the passenger side, what's going on the passenger side of the business. So, that's what the sexy part is. But the thing that's gotten into the realm now, I think, is we need to drive it down into, ULDs. Can we do ULD training? What's dangerous goods? Dangerous goods is, that subject alone is a full year if you really want to delve into the whole aspects of handling it, what it can do on the aircraft, all the incidents we've had. There's a host of different things you can do there. So I think we could drive some of the smaller things down there. And that's where I told her, I said, if we were let's start with like Miami-Dade schools in the Miami area and at least get them interested. Get them into the degree program. And when we get to the degree program, let's bring in people like you and others and at high levels to talk about the air cargo business. what is it being a CEO? Looking at the bottom line, the profit line, and how do we deal with sales and marketing and selling the product? And how does that affect the aircraft and aircraft routing? I mean, there's a host of different things you can delve into, but take some of these leaders and also make them mentors.
Yep.
When you get to the students, and even in high school, there's a lot of people out there. You know, if I was a cargo manager or a warehouse supervisor, I'd love to talk to students in high school about what we do.
Yep.
What it does to get the stuff on their table or their electronic device in their hands. How did it get there?
Yeah.
So there's a story to tell. And then I think we have to go into the program though, because my whole aspect in this education side was I used to go to 3 universities in the United States to get interns for my airline. And what I wanted was, I was picking from the logistics program. So I go to the University of Tennessee. What do they focus on? They have, but they focus around FedEx, because the FedEx is in there and they're trying to teach what FedEx is. I go to I went to the University of Wisconsin. They had a program. What did they focus on? Something totally different. And then I had Michigan State. So I take interns from 3. They all come in. What they've been taught has nothing to do with what I need them for. They had to do it for something else. And I had to reteach them. So those students was like a whole re-education, and they didn't want to be that. They come in, want to be a manager at a level, but you're not a manager until you know the aspects of what you have to do.
Yeah.
So my whole thing is, let's bring that real desire. What did the airlines want? What did the ground handling companies want? What did the forwarders need into the actual training or the education and the curriculum? That's when they get out of school, there's a job waiting for them. And mentor them, and let's relook at it a different way. And so that's what FIU, and that's why I'm glad to be part of their commercial advisory board in the program, that I'm going to lead the group up, and hopefully that we can build this curriculum on today's needs and kind of follow the German model of education, that we can get people in the aspect of really walking out the door and there's something waiting for.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, and also they can get a taste and a bit of experience before they make their final decision, which is also for youngsters. You mentioned about, so let's say the 2 of us now. You know, I always tell my kids that they don't know what it was like before the mobile phone, and I tell them, like, you know, I spent some time in Ireland growing up, you know, with my brothers, and we had outdoor toilet. We had to go to the well to get water. There was no electricity. There was oil lamps on the wall, and they go, "Dad, that's ridiculous." And then, you know, we used to go to church in a pony and trap and things like that, you know. So, but I think it's important that people understand that difference. And just in our business, you're talking about, you know, e-freight and everything to do electronic. I can remember panicking because we had no Banda fluid to roll off the manifests and getting that ink everywhere, you know, and things like that. And then putting the Banda fluid in the supervisor's pipe and doing drop by drop until it went up, you know. So it's some crazy things, but there's a history lesson as well. With aviation, you know, to bring people up to where we are now, which at the end of the day is a safe and wonderful industry.
It is. And you know, what's been great for me is all the places it's taken us both around the world. People you meet, and you know, my job, you know, at United as head of cargo services was, I got to meet people and learn things all over the world. And we went and started building our cargo facilities, and I said, I don't want to call them a warehouse. They're not a warehouse. They're a cargo transfer center. Get this stuff in and get it out. And airline properties are expensive. On airport, the cost of on being on airport is so outrageous, because they're competing against hotels and banks and everything else that wants to be on an airport. And they don't really, the airports in a lot of cases don't care about cargo. They've become more so now because it's the big generator of revenue for them in many cases, but they don't. And so I picked people from my front end counter my warehouses and a couple of warehouses. I had a team of about 7 people from around the United States primarily, and I had one from the UK. And all we did for a year is go around and visiting other cargo facilities that airlines and ground handlers would let us see. So we went to Schiphol, we went to Heathrow, we went to Frankfurt, we went to Hong Kong, we went to Hachtel, we went to all the places. And what did we find that was going to work for us? And my industrial engineer, because what they used to do is, here's your box, use the box, build the box, boom. I said, I want to design what's going to be inside first, and then you can put the box around it. And we started with process flows, and we manual roller beds, and I wasn't big into automation. But it just didn't fit what we needed. But what can we do to make it manual? Because if an ETV it dies, you're done. You've got to get a mechanic in there, and I've got planes waiting. What's the backup? So we went in more of a manual approach at most of the locations. And so those sort of ideas came out from people that did the work. And I think that's important to get their buy-in and involvement. It's not perfect. You know, our first cargo facility we built, we went with the what everybody calls a tent structure at JFK, and it sits there till today. But we designed them because of the efficiency of that fabric tensioned building. They were hangars, what they originally were designed for. And so we went to Honolulu. We had to deal with hurricanes, and we built one in Miami, and we built one, the largest one in Los Angeles. It's the largest cargo facility in LAX. It's been there now for 25 years almost, and it's still, you know, still that function. But you have to change things, and getting buy-in. Fortunately, you have to get the leader that's buy-in to get you the money to build what you need. But those are the sort of things that, you know, it's all encompassing. The air cargo is complicated. It is complicated.
And we have to try and make it as simple as possible now moving forward. So the complexity costs money, and complexity costs.
But we, you know, these tools, these kind of tools are the stuff that's out there. That I live on that. I don't really use my laptop much anymore. I use it for this and other things, but for the most, I'm living off of that. But that's what people are living by. And the Sandham I'm working with, they're building technology for staffing. And the staffing technology is designed to. What I liked about what the company was, it's for airports, it's for airlines, it's for ground handlers. It could be for anything, but it takes in what's the size of the plane? How many people do I need? How many people are on board the aircraft? How many wheelchairs? How much cargo's in there? How many positions? So it takes all that and builds a staffing model in advance, and then it builds it up to the day. But each individual that works the airplane is working off their mobile device, so they know how many people are going to be, you know, coming off the plane if it's late, you know, turn times, all of that's built into the software. So that's the kind of technology for me. It's exciting. There's a lot of other companies with pricing mechanisms. What I'm doing with PayCargo, I think PayCargo's got a lot of great opportunities in changing how finance is done. And so that's why I'm there. I wouldn't be there if it wasn't exciting.
So again, just closing up now, Mike, because we're coming near to the end of it, and again, another nice little avenue into what we should be covering as well. But data-driven decision making is critical moving forward. And one of the decisions you made as well when you left was joining the board of PayCargo. So just to close up, because I think we're probably going to have another session with you, because we've covered so much information and there's so much more to extract. And I was talking about going to the well for water. Here I am now going to the well for wisdom. But what are the three key positive factors that made you want to be associated with PayCargo?
So one was the electronic side, getting rid of paper, because I worked with under CNS. We have a marketing agreement. They still have a marketing agreement with CNS. And it was just getting rid of the ancillary charges, the stupid checks and running checks to the airport, and how much manpower, and they're wrong, write them again. To me, that's the kind of stuff that we need. It may be considered little stuff, but it's easy stuff.
That's unique in the US, isn't it? The check.
Particularly in the US.
Okay.
And that got rid of a process that it saves time, it saves manpower, and it's more accurate.
Yeah.
But working with other things, you know, like ULD control, ULD payments.
Yeah.
That was another thing that, so the technology is one thing. The other thing I like with them is that they are very fast in programming. So they're using API, they're programming, they're, you know, they're not just air, they're ocean, they're rail, they're global.
Yeah.
And so they have this connectivity with a lot of different companies that's already built in. So their programming is not weeks and months, it's maybe just a couple of days, and they're ready to go to connect with other companies' IT programs. So that's the other part. The third is the growth of the company and the vision of the company, because they're growing. They have a large capital investment. They're expanding. They're looking at other things. We're looking, you know, into truck payments, rail payments. It's intermodal. So I think the whole capabilities of their systems and the worldwide reach, those are the kind of the three things to me that were important, and mostly because of their leadership. I think they're very focused. I know you've talked to Lionel, and I've worked together. Lionel's a great guy, but you know, Eduardo, who's the CEO of the company, he has a vision in treating people well, and I think that's an important thing with PayCargo. And they're willing to work with customers. They're not forcing things. They have ideas that I think are really, and that's why I'm there. I'm helping hopefully to push those ideas as a board member, that how can we expand and look at improved other things.
Brilliant. Which again is a nice way to end, my friend, which is all about caring. And those that care, yep, I think are going to get a much, much bigger share of the pie as we come out of this terrible past year. So
definitely.
Thank you so much. Good luck with everything you're doing, whether it's with FIU, or whether it's with customs, whether it's with Sidnan, or whether it's with PayCargo, and whether it's with Trade Network. But good luck, Mike. Busy man. That's what you got to do. Keep yourself.
All right, Chris.
Yep. And then good luck with the old knee injuries.
All right. Stay safe. Stay well.
Yep. Likewise. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.